Thank you for inviting me. I see there's a big group. I'm glad you all are able to join. Um, Long list of people. Lovely. I hope we all have a blessed time together. I will introduce myself shortly. I'm Arjan, and here I'm from the Netherlands, and I'm 41 years old, living with my family here, and I happen to visit other groups in the last 2, 3 months, sharing what we call a Sunday law message. There's several people going around. I'm not sure how which number I am for your ministry. Am I the first? Am I the last? Um, but I'm sure you've seen others as well, heard others as well. My presentation, as I'm have prepared it, I actually try to do it every time I visit a group, do more or less the same thing. I do one presentation, and the last time slot, I'll have a Q&A open. Maybe there are some additional things that I want to add, and then we'll finish with the Q&A. I've tried to do that more or less every time I've been visiting a group. You may be aware that I've done presentations in Germany in January, it was. I did a 3-part series there. I'm not sure if it was translated in the different languages that are around in your area, or everybody speaks English. That is even better. But I did a 3-part series there, and that's basically the fundamental thing that I actually want to present. So I hope you've seen that, because I'm not going to repeat that in the details that I shared it there. I'm going to review that study here in the first hour, but not with all the details that I shared it there. So if you really want to have all the detailed information, I recommend to watch that 3-part series. As you all know, we've been since I think about a year now. It's May, so it's a year ago that this whole process of a Sunday law message has started with, I think, Elder Terry. She introduced July 18, July as the Sunday law waymark, as what we understand to be the Sunday law waymark. And since then, we've come into a process of trying to understand the Sunday law waymark. Elder Terry has been focusing in her studies on America internally, so what we would call Western Front. In my studies that I presented in January this year, I've focused on the same history, but then from another perspective, from the Eastern Front perspective. So the Eastern Front perspective is the battles between the King of the North and the King of the South. So that is America, how America relates itself to the rest of the world. That is Eastern Front. And I have been focusing on that in my study. So it's actually 2 different studies. Technically, they're not connected. Of course, in the real world, there's always a connection. But it's 2 different stories, but they need to line up with each other. And one of the premises that I had when I presented my study in January was that I found it interesting, or back in the day I thought it was questionable, that Elder Terry introduced a Sunday law message, while in reality we in the movement didn't really understand the waymarks that were before. So Panium, Increase of Knowledge, and Exeter were 3 waymarks that were not really established at all, actually. I think Panium was not even established. The increase of knowledge wasn't, there was some vague idea about it, but not really a concrete um, study on it. Exeter wasn't introduced even, and then Elder Terry suddenly came with Sunday law. So my premise in my study was, shouldn't we understand Panium, Boston? Shouldn't we understand Concord? Shouldn't we understand Exeter before we even can understand the Sunday law? So that was my premise. So I went back in my study, not really focusing on Sunday law waymark, but on the waymarks before that: Panium, Boston, Concord, uh, and Exeter. But not from the Western Front perspective, but from the Eastern Front perspective. So I haven't tried to touch Elder Terry's line and um, in the content of her line. I've been trying to put a structure of our dispensation, or that dispensation, based on the Eastern Front. So that's what I've been trying. That was my premise, or that's what I've tried to do there, and I will review that study here with you. Before I go to that particular dispensation and that particular line, I want to start with another history, the history that starts before that dispensation, because we're going to look at Panium to the Sunday law primarily. But what is happening before Panium? That's what I want to look at first before to be able to understand Panium better. So that's where I want to go first. Are there any thoughts or comments, questions before we start? Everybody can hear and see me clearly? If I don't hear anything, I assume it's okay. So I'll start. I'll start here. I'll start in 1989. So I hope you can see this board. Sometimes my camera focuses a little bit. Try to do my best to show. So before 1989, we have a world situation where there's two superpowers, um, a bilateral world, we call it. It's during the Cold War, you have the USSR and you have the USA as the two primary world powers together in a bilateral world, and they keep each other in balance, so to speak. We all know that in 1989, followed by 1991, the King of the South, the USSR, falls. So we see a fall of the King of the South here, of the USSR, in this history, which means that the USA is left over as the only world power, it's the only superpower in the world. And they start to use that, what we call unilateral power. And so we see the USSR fall, it loses its power, it loses its influence, and we see that the USA is actually rising in power, and it starts to use their unilateral power and also misusing it as the only power in the world, or the only superpower in the world. Then we come to 9/11, and the events of 9/11 give us also another view of America. Firstly, because it shows that it's actually vulnerable, that the USA is vulnerable, or in other words, you could say the USA is weak, shows some weakness. So I'm going to write down USA shows weakness. I'll write down here. I'll write down your deadly wound and death. And because of the events of 9/11, we see that even the USA, although it shows vulnerability, it starts to rise even more and starts to misuse their unilateral power even more, because now here in 2003, they want to invade Iraq. They want to invade Iraq because they have information, or supposed to have information, that Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction. They tried to convince the world based on some intelligence, information, satellite footage they have shared with the world, shared with the United Nations. And actually, on the level of the United Nations, the world says, no, you better don't invade. The USA goes anyway. So they go in against um, support of the United Nations, against the rules, so to speak, because they believe they have evidence they should go, and they want to be they. You can see this patriarchal mindset here, where they've been attacked, so now they need to attack back in even a stronger fashion. They went into Afghanistan already. Now they want to go into Iraq. They want to show the world that they are the boss and that they are untouchable, invincible. And actually, by doing that, they show that their weakness. Because in 2004, it becomes clear that Saddam Hussein has no weapons of mass destruction, that the information that they used was false or incomplete, and the rest of the world realizes that the USA is an untrustworthy partner. It's lost its credibility since then. So we see the USA rise since 1989, 1991 in power. It starts to misuse that power. And there comes a point in time where the rest of the world realizes the USA is not a credible partner. And it uses its credibility. So we see the United States credibility decrease. In this same time period, we see a resurrection of the King of the South. This, you could say, vacuum. It's not that the USA is completely disappeared from the world stage, not at all. But there is some vacuum. There is, especially because of what happened here in Iraq, Vladimir Putin realized, like, if America can do this, and nobody's complaining, nobody is accusing him of anything. Of course, there's some people are disturbed by it, but they could do anything. Vladimir Putin recognizes this and starts to increase its influence on the world stage. So since this time period, we see a rise of a resurrected king of the South. So it's not the USSR anymore; it's Russia now. The spheres of influence is not satellite states, but it's worldwide now. So it's not Poland and Eastern Europe and in Asia, but it's now worldwide. It's Asia, it's countries in Africa, it's South America, Eastern Europe. There's a lot of influence. There's many countries where Russia is gaining influence, and they are increasing in power, and that comes to a point what we call, which is 2019, Raffia. Raffia is the climax, the high point of Russia's power. This is the point where I think Elder Tess has mentioned that, but I think we've read articles where we saw that Russia was part of the world stage. It had a lot of influence in, well, all the districts that I just mentioned. it had its climax in 2019. And that brings us to 2021, actually, where we want to start our discussion. That's pan. So we know from several studies that the king of the south wins several battles here. We have like Heraclea or Asculum, or you can call it Raphia here. It is the king of the south every time defeats the king of the north. And then we meet 2021, and there things start to change. There we see a turning point, a point where things start to be different. In this time period, we see the USA losing credibility, it decreases in power, and we see Russia rise in power, and also defeating several times. In regard to information warfare, we see Russia win. So 2021 comes. We're in October, and Joe Biden is president, and he is invited to a meeting that is organized by his intelligence services. The CIA comes together in the White House, invites the president, vice president, and they are sitting there in the office and listen to the information shared. And what the CIA and the intelligence services share with Biden is very detailed and so exact that Biden is confronted with a dilemma. Because what he hears in October that Vladimir Putin is going to invade Ukraine full scale. So not a small invasion, not like only an eastern front, a little bit of attack of some villages. No, it's going to be a full-scale invasion of whole Ukraine. They will take the capital. They want to topple the government, replace it with a pro-Russian government, and take a lot of territory, several provinces in the east and south. That was the plan. That was the idea. And Biden heard about this, and it was very detailed, very exact information. And Biden was convinced that it was true. So now he was faced with a dilemma. What should he do? Because he had two problems. The first one, America lost its credibility already almost 2 decades ago. Since about 2 decades, America hasn't been significantly involved in intervening projects. Barack Obama didn't do anything when he heard about Russia entering Crimea. Nothing. It was quiet, silent. Barack Obama didn't dare to intervene or even say something about it, or nothing. Because America could make the same mistake again, lose even more credibility. So they didn't dare to. Joe Biden now, it's the same problem, facing that same dilemma. And the second part is, of course, is that in the meantime, Russia gained a lot of influence, not only in all those territories that I mentioned, in those African, South American, or North Korean, Asian countries where he actively worked together with those nations, but he also gained a lot of influence and within Europe, the Western world, which was originally the greatest enemy. Putin was able to change the perception of Russia in the Western world. That were within NATO, they were publicly discussing even the necessity of having NATO. Was Russia still an enemy? Because Russia was okay, right? Was a trustworthy partner. They did business with Russia. It was, of course, there were some problems in Russia, but it was okay. It was just a normal country as all the other countries. All the countries have issues. Russia has issues, but it's okay. It's a trustworthy partner. You can do business with them. You can trust them. So even NATO publicly discussed like or some of the NATO states were publicly discussing whether they should treat Russia as an enemy still. So that was a problem Biden was facing with, because he believed Russia is going to invade Ukraine, full-scale war. But first, the problem was nobody would believe him because they lost credibility over the years. And secondly, nobody really believed that Putin would do something such an evil thing. Um, so Biden could do the same thing as Barack Obama did and do nothing, but he decided to do something. And I think that is the critical point of Pentium, where Biden decides we're going to do something about this. Uh, we're going to make this a turning point. We're going to swap places in a sense in this war, because Russia was all the time winning this information, especially on the information war level. Were winning this battle. They were always ahead of the USA. USA has always been behind, and for a long time didn't even realize there was such a thing as an information war. Um, and now, in the way Joe Biden approached this problem, really showed, um, really gained trust in. No, I should say differently. What Joe Biden did is he released secret intelligences or sensitive information that possibly could be half right, half wrong, or partly right, partly wrong. But he shared some of the information with his allies, tried to convince them that Russia would invade full scale. Well, it was real. The problem that Biden was facing was real, because most partners, most allies didn't believe Biden, because of those two reasons that I said. America wasn't such a trustworthy partner, and secondly, Russia wasn't that evil, right? Um, so it took until the day of the invasion for 99% of all the world and all the other states to realize that Joe Biden was actually right. So Joe Biden, in this time period, since October till February the next year, the invasion, Joe Biden was saying, "Don't trust Putin. Putin is going to invade. Don't trust him. Um, this is bad. This is evil, and we should prepare for a full-scale war." And even the government of Ukraine didn't believe it. Um, I shared all that information in my studies in Germany. We read a lot about it. Not going to repeat all that. So I'm really reviewing and summarizing it now. So we start a new line here in 2021, and we're going to try to bookend all the waymarks. So I'll bookend this one from February to October. February is where um, the war actually begins, instigated by America. So the King of the North instigates this battle, so to speak. Panium is also Beneventum. Beneventum is a war that is instigated by the King of the North, and it's also won by the King of the North. And that was the last of the three battles of Pyrrhus. Heraclea, Asculum. King of the South, Pyrrhus won both of those battles. This one was the turning point. This one, the King of the North, finally wins this battle. And it was also a decisive battle, because the King of the South, or Pyrrhus, leaves Italy and is finally defeated at the end. And Rome takes the whole of Italy under its control in the end. And that was 2020, or Beneventum was the turning point in that decision. And the King of the North finally also wins that that battle. It takes until February for the rest of the world to realize that. February 24, we know it was the invasion of Russia into Ukraine. This is 2022. And I'm saying this is the increase of knowledge, or you could say concord. This is Boston. This is Concord. And this specifically, this Concord, this is the specific Concord that Elder Tess in her studies on X27 and Pyrus marked with the 273. This is the 273 waymark. This is where, after the Battle of Beneventum, the ambassadors, Egypt sends its ambassadors to Rome, because here Egypt hears of Pyrrhus' defeat. Rome defeats Pyrrhus, and Egypt realizes, oh, Rome is a force to count with. So they win this battle here. Egypt sends its ambassadors to start diplomatic relations, basically also to give credits to what they have done, so like congratulate them and say, we want to have diplomatic relations with you. That happened in 273. Egypt sending ambassadors to Rome, and that's the story of Quintus Fabius Maximus Gurgis, happening in 273, which is Quintus Fabius Maximus Gurgis is actually when Rome sends ambassadors to Egypt back. Not mixing those up here. So, but this symbol of 273, we have a symbol of concord here. I think they are all important to establish this waymark. So in February, we see the invasion, and suddenly the whole world realizes that Joe Biden was right. So what happened here, where Joe Biden was sharing intelligences, trying to be first with information before Putin could even do something, really winning. I shared more information on this in my previous presentations, which I'm not going to read in detail now. But all the things that Biden did in sharing intelligences, being ahead of Putin, preventing Putin for false flag attacks, false flag using false flag methods, so to speak. Biden was really in control of the situation and was really winning the narrative, although the rest of the world was doubting. When they came here, they realized, oh, Joe Biden was right, and Joe Biden America was winning this narrative, was winning the information war, because Putin was saying, no, we only have a military buildup for military training purposes. It's not for an invasion or things like that. And Joe Biden has been saying, no, that's a lie. You cannot trust him. And in February, the rest of the world realizes, oh, Biden was right. A little bit the same with Egypt, realizing that the king of the north was a partner they should count with. And they gave their credits here. Egypt gave their credits to the king of the north, to Rome. So I'm going to address 4 events specifically. I talked about the invasion now, but I'm going to specify 4 other events. The first one is on the 21st of February. We see the declaration of independence. So this is a declaration of independence by Russia, by Putin, of I'll call it the Donbas region. So the Donbas region is those eastern provinces in Ukraine. They belong to Ukraine. But on the 21st of February, Putin says those provinces are actually independent nations, independent states. They don't belong to Ukraine. So that's what he does on the 21st. Then the 24th, he invades Ukraine. He invades from the north to take Kiev, and he invades from the east to take those provinces that he just declared independent. Then on the 25th, the world comes together. The world realizes we have a new war, a war on the European continent, and the world is in turmoil. So there is an emergency summit of NATO coming together, online summit. All the states come together with their representatives online, and they talk about the issue in Ukraine. And suddenly, whole NATO is united against Russia, because what Russia does and did is they can't do it. It's illegal and should stop immediately. So everybody realizes, okay, Russia is the enemy. So suddenly NATO is in concord, where they weren't before. These events here brought NATO in unity, in concord against Russia. That's on the 25th. Also on the 25th is the United Nations Security Council coming together. So the United Nations Security Council comes together to vote for a resolution. The resolution was brought in and said, basically what Russia is doing in Ukraine, invading Ukraine, should immediately stop and is illegal, and Russia should pull back their military immediately. Something like that. So the United Nations Security Council comes together to vote on that resolution. So to understand the Security Council, it's important to understand the Security Council a little bit. So it's part of the United Nations, and the Security Council is a separate council that it contains. How do you say that? It has it has 15 states participate in that council. 15 states. 5 of them are permanent members, and the other 10 are rotating every first or second year. So they're different every year or every second year. And the 5 permanent members, which are Russia, the United States, China, UK, and France, they are the permanent members, and they also have a special place in voting, because those 5 permanent members have veto power. So if one of those powers says no to a resolution, the resolution will not pass. So there's only one exception to the rule, and that is when a nation is part of the issue, is part of the conflict, then this nation is not allowed to vote within this resolution. So in this case, we have Russia is part of the problem, is actually causing the problem. And now this resolution is about Russia invading Ukraine. So according to the rules, according to the United Nations Charter, which is basically the constitution of the United Nations, it's the book with all the rules and how the United Nations operates. According to those rules, it says when you're part of the problem, you're not allowed to vote on the resolution. So Russia is not allowed to vote, but they do that anyway. This rule has been neglected over the years, and Russia is able to vote and does it. So Russia vetoes the resolution. this whole voting system, the rules that talk about the United Nations Security Council and the voting of that uh, council, is described in Article 27. And it contains 3 bullets. Starts with the basic rule, a basic statement. There's a second statement, and then the third one is basically the important one, where it says you should have a majority. The majority of the states should, and a resolution can only pass when the majority of states uh, agrees with the resolution, except if one of the 5 member states vetoes it. Basically, it's different words, but that's basically what it says. And then also is the exception included in that rule where it says, but if you're part of a problem, if you're part of the issue, you're not allowed to vote. So all that information is part of the third bullet. So you have here Article 27.3 is where the rules of the United Nations Security Council come together about the voting issue. So we have a 273 here, which I think is interesting. So we have a 273 here, the world coming together, and I showed a video also of this council on this particular day in January. I showed a video online where this council stands up after they have voted and the resolution is not passed because it is vetoed. All the people from the Security Council, except Russia, come to the front. They stand in front of a camera and they say, this war should immediately stop. They take a statement together with the United States. The United States is in the middle, and all the other nations are around it. And they say, this should stop. Actually, Russia is not allowed to veto this resolution. And this war should immediately stop, and Russia should pull back their military. And there you could see that the United Nations Security Council as a representation. I'm not saying that is the fulfillment of prophecy, but I think it was a nice illustration of what happened in the world, that the Western world came together and stood with the United States. They gave credit to the United States and said, like, America was right from the beginning here, and we stand with them now. And we can't accept that Article 27.3 was broken. So we have a concord here, a coming together, having a unity, and then we have a 273 here as well. Then I want to go to September. This war, which was supposed to be very short, according to Vladimir Putin, because he thought he could take Kiev in 3-4 days, and he thought he could take those provinces in a few weeks. This war started in February, and it takes on and it takes on. And after a few weeks, he stops in the north because he realizes they can't take Kiev, so they pull back. And then they go full scale on the east, and it takes months and months and months, and they cannot even win so much territory as they wanted. And then in August, Ukraine starts a counteroffensive. So now in August, very fast, Ukraine starts to win territory on the Russians. So the Russians in those months win territory, and now they start losing territory back to the um, oh, what did I do? Back to the Russians. So now Putin is having a problem because he says he realized that this thing is failing. He expected this to happen in a few weeks, and it's now half a year. It's happening half a year now, and they are losing territory. So what he does on September the 30th, he organizes a big party in Moscow, and he claims to the rest of the world, but especially within his own country, he says that he won. He actually won this war. and on the 30th they annex. So this is an annexation of the Donbas region. So an annexation of those eastern provinces. He does not even have them. He is actually losing territory at this moment. He's losing territory in those provinces, but he has a party in Moscow where it says, we own them now, we annex them, and they belong to Russia. While in reality, they did not even have them. So until today, they don't have them, actually. So on the same day also, the United Nations comes together again. And Russia vetoes a resolution again, because this resolution is about that annexation and the referendum that took place a few days before that. And it says that referendum was illegal. The annexation of those provinces is illegal. And we do not accept the annexation of those provinces. That's basically what the resolution said. And Russia vetoes the power, and Russia breaks Rule 27.3 again. So we have a 273 here. So we have bookends of 273s here. And to finish that also is that the September the 30th in this year is the 273rd day of the year. Well, so we have enough 273s here now. We have Concord. We have Egypt sending ambassadors to Rome, meaning the Western world, the allies of America, give credit to America of what happened here. So the world realized here what happened here. So we can see those elements. I think this is. So I think there is several characteristics, several symbols here that are fitting this waymark neatly. Yeah. So one of the other things of an increase of knowledge is if you go to Boston, Boston is also a time of the end, right? A time of the end. And at the time of the end, the problem or the issue of this dispensation is not visible. It is still invisible. Joe Biden maybe saw it, but I think the real problem is the fall of the King of the South here. So the fall of the King of the South, the events taking place here at Panium marks the deadly wound, you could call, or the beginning of the fall of the King of the South externally. And you can't really see that in 2021. Only when you look back now, you can see it. But at the moment, it is you can't really see it. Here, you start to see it. Here you start to see it. Here you start to see that actually Putin has a problem. He brought himself into a problem. This whole invasion brought him in a problem where he can't get out himself. And there's only one that could help him, and that's the King of the North. So we can see the problem now. We can see the beginning of the fall of the King of the South here. And that is going to become reality in the next waymark. So now it is formalized in Exeter. So I'm first going to draw the line how I presented it in Germany, and then I'll talk about what I think about it now. So in Germany now, I said this is Exeter, starting from July to November 2024. So that was the challenging part, because Elder Terry has been addressing this time period as the Sunday Law waymark, this one here, National Sunday Law. So in Germany, I said, I think this is Exeter. And from July to November, we see that the King of the North takes step to Putin and starts to talk about, shall we have negotiations? And Putin agrees, but they can't do anything, and they have to wait for Trump to be in power. So they have to wait for the next year, 2025. And that was my premise, my theory, that 2025 is National Sunday, or is Sunday Law, where since February they have been started the negotiations. So the negotiations started in February this year. They started talking about it. On diplomatic relations were restored. Oh, someone is sharing screen. And so my premise was, Exeter is a mini version of the real thing happening here. So Exeter is also a loud cry, or a midnight cry. So what do you cry about at what do you see in the world happening? Why do you cry at this waymark? I think there was also Elder Parminder at the ICM presenting on this subject. What is an Exeter about? What do you cry about? Why do you cry then? Why don't you cry before? Because here you can see it. You can see it here, but here you understand it. Now you realize it, you can see it happening, it's happening right now in front of your eyes, and you understand what is happening, what is going to happen here. The same thing is happening here. I'll call it a mini version, a smaller version of what is happening here. So we can see the King of the North going to Putin and start negotiations, but Trump is not in power. Well, I say King of the North, but yeah, Trump is not in power here and has to wait for power. So that was my initial, and then I called this the death of the King of the South, where you have negotiations. Those negotiations will finally have a result. Whatever the result is, the fact that Russia has to listen, has to basically kneel down for the USA and say like, okay, please, can you help me solve this problem, is basically losing. That is how I still see the issue, the death of the King of the South. So in a nutshell, this is what I presented in Germany this year. Panium to Sunday Law. Boston, Concord, Exeter. I didn't focus so much on it wasn't for me, it wasn't about this waymark. It was more to establish those waymarks for us to be able to understand this waymark. Well, in the meantime, we're in May now. We're four months further. Messages have been developing. Elder Terry has been developing her message. Others have contributed to that. And I have come to the realization that on the Western Front perspective, July is Sunday Law. I don't want to go in a Western Front study, but I have accepted that premise. Also, at the same time, I realized I still have many questions and I don't fully understand all the consequences of that decision, or of that truth. Firstly, of my own line, this one here, and I also still have questions about Western Front, some details about it. But I have seen enough. I've seen that message develop enough in such a way that I think I can see the image of the beast set up, for example, in July in the Republican Party, the studies on the dragon, the studies on the daily. I can see those things come together very neatly where I think like, yes, I can see the Republican Party as being the issue uh, instead of where we saw America first as a whole, as one thing. Now we can see, oh, America is actually several things. You have the glorious land, you have America One, you have America Two, Republicanism, Democratic Party. You have so there's you have the lamb, you have the dragon, you have the glorious land. All those dynamics. It's not just America is. America is has become a dragon. No, what is actually the dragon within the United States, and how was it? Where was that set up? Um, those elements, I think, I start to understand better now. I, I'm still learning. In regard to the Western Front, I'm as much a student as you all are. Um, at the same time, they have also influence on what I've been teaching over the last few months. And I question myself: was it all wrong? Was it partly right, partly wrong? What should I adjust to it to make it fit? These have been my my questions and still are. I have tried to use those studies here to get my answers, but I found out that that was not really the right way to do it. Um, I wanted to wait for all my answers to be answered to go for July 18. I've been in my mind for a long time thinking about changing to July 18. I saw it, not for some time. I saw it, but I wanted all my answers, all my questions to be answered. And recently, a few weeks ago now, I decided, no, I don't need all the answers to my questions. I have enough evidence to accept the truth. I learned that through the years in this message, in this movement, you can accept something even though you still have questions or you don't fully understand all the intricacies. Um, so I still have, all right, maybe some 20 minutes. Um, so also on the beginning of this year, with Elder Terry shared some thoughts in regard to the King of the North, King of the South. She said, if the King of the North, so let me draw it this way. So Elder Terry says, 2021 National Sunday Law, Worldwide Sunday Law. She says this dispensation for America is an internal issue. So this is the rise of the seventh kingdom internally. And then you have the rise of that same kingdom externally to the rest of the world. Now it's going to force the Sunday law to the rest of the nations. So it's going to act unilateral. So first, America is tested, so to speak, or you have an internal issue. Then it's external. For the same thing, she says, if that is true for the king of the north, compare and contrast with the king of the south, which is falling, we should first expect an internal fall and then an external fall. So this is, I think, how Elder Terry described it, and I think also drew it on the whiteboard. I accept that premise. I've accepted that the external fall. So actually, the thing that I've been talking about in this line and I marked it here at the National Sunday Law, is actually at the Worldwide Sunday Law. So this moving the death of the King of the South is actually something that we expect happening here, together with the rest of the world, basically. Because here you can see the United States, the USA, is actually growing in influence. It's using its unilateral power, and if you watch the news today, that's what's happening. It's using its unilateral power to bring all the nations on their knees to listen and follow the USA in their footsteps, and Russia is going to be one of those. And the rest of the world, together with Russia, are falling for the United States, are stepping in line with them, bowing down to the image. So first internal, then external. So what I propose is the following. I agree with that model, but I would draw it a little different. The endpoints of those lines I agree with, but I don't agree with the beginning. Because what I am suggesting is that 2021 is both the beginning of the internal fall or rise. So you could say this is the rise of the King of the South internally, but it's also the rise of externally. It is the fall internally, but it's also the fall externally. I don't know if you can see that, if that is clear. So the endpoints of those events, they still are the same, but I'm suggesting that 2021 is the beginning also of the external fall. And I think that's the whole story of Panium and Beneventum. Beneventum and Panium say this is the turning point for Russia. It's the deadly wound for Russia. This is where Russia is losing its influence, it's losing its power, and from now on, it's going down. So that's what happened in 2021. I don't think we can neglect that. So 2021 marks that fall, the beginning of the fall of the King of the South. Um, so that's my first assumption. Then based on this, I'm going to suggest the following, is that each one of those arrows is telling you a different story. So what I didn't do yet. So Elder Terry says National Sunday Law, Worldwide Sunday Law. That's correct. I'm going to place it a little different. What I'm saying is this is Sunday Law. This is Sunday Law. It's all Sunday Law. But it depends on the story you're telling. So for this story here, this waymark is Sunday Law. If you tell this story, then that waymark is Sunday Law. So we have been focusing on this story here. So on this story here, in this model, is this line, this story. And that story starts in 2021, and Sunday Law is here. So I'm going to focus on this one now here. I'm going to draw this out and say, "2021 Sunday Law, 2022 2024." Let me first, before I go here. So what I'm doing is I'm drawing this dispensation. I'm telling this story from 2021. This is the external fall of the king of the south. It ends. It begins in 2021. It ends at the Sunday law. We know it's worldwide Sunday law, but in that story, it's not. I'm saying that's not relevant because for this story, it is Sunday law. Sunday law and Sunday law is the same thing. It's only a different moment in time, but depending on the story you're telling, it's Sunday law for each of those that story. So for this story, Sunday law is here. So I'm suggesting if you draw this line and tell this story, this is not a Sunday law. This waymark doesn't exist, basically. It's not a Sunday law because the Sunday law is here. So in this story, you need a Boston and a Concord and an Exeter also. So for now, I'm suggesting that my original premise, the 2022 and the 2024 July, this one here, are Concord and Exeter, and they are telling you something about the Sunday law, but that's worldwide Sunday law. And I think you can do that based on of what I've tried to show here, whether it's national Sunday law or worldwide Sunday law is Sunday law. Depending on the story you're telling, you are stuck with one of those two. And for this story, we're stuck with the worldwide Sunday law. So worldwide Sunday law is here. And I'm suggesting that that is what this line is showing. 2021 is not only Exeter of national Sunday law, it's also Exeter for worldwide Sunday law. 2021 or Panium is an Exeter for Sunday law. And it depends on, I hear myself, I hear an echo. Thank you. So 2021 is an Exeter for Sunday law. And depending on the story you're telling, it's an Exeter for this Sunday law or for that Sunday law. So for this story, I'm saying 2021 is still an Exeter, but the death year is at the Sunday law. And I'm saying this is then worldwide Sunday law, but it's Sunday law. So this is what I did, I think last week as well. So this is a new element to the study that I did in January. 2021 is Exeter. For what Sunday law? For both Sunday laws. It's my suggestion. To finish my thought, I don't want to be misunderstood. I still believe, so I make this now one dispensation, going from 2021 to worldwide Sunday law for this story. I make it one dispensation. I don't want to be misunderstood. I still believe in the separation of these two dispensations, depending on the story you're telling. There's still two dispensations here, especially there is still a national Sunday law and there's a worldwide Sunday law. We have a Boston, we have a Concord and an Exeter here. We have a Concord and an Exeter here, which is actually the loud cry. So I'm not denying, I'm not saying that we've passed the loud cry. I'm not saying that. It's still there. But for this story, for the external fall of the king of the south, I'm suggesting that this is, you could call it a dispensation. It is a Sunday law. And this is the small Exeter, the mini version that tells you something about the Sunday law. So going to finish this. So this is one model, 2021 to worldwide Sunday law. I'm going to erase this one for now because I'm going to the separated one, this one. And then this is July to November, where the King of the North starts to talk with Putin, and Putin agrees. Says, yes, let's have a talk the next year. This is March. I'm suggesting this is March. March is where one of the players in this story, I don't want to go into this because of the details, but because of time. Sorry, can you mute yourself? Thank you. So in part of this story is Viktor Orban, who played a role in this element, in this story. And Viktor Orban comes into the picture here, where he meets with Trump, and they agree that they're going to do something here about the war in Ukraine. So I say Orban meet with Trump. I think that's March 8th. So if we look to those separate dispensations, we have Pannium to national Sunday law. And then here we have increase of knowledge, leading to the worldwide Sunday law. So I think February, this story marked the beginning of that dispensation, that waymark. February, I think it's February 18, where Russia and America agree that they're going to have, they restore their, what's the word? They restored the diplomatic relations, because the diplomatic relations were frozen, were after the invasion, things changed in the Biden administration. The both countries weren't talking with each other, I think. Diplomatic relations were restored. That was the beginning that needed to be done for them to be able to talk on Ukraine and stuff like that. So that happened in February 18. Those diplomatic relations were restored and marked the beginning of negotiations and talks. And I think at the moment, so this is very fresh and new, but at the moment I am considering that yesterday was the end of this waymark. So I'm saying May 2nd was the end of this waymark. Firstly, there's this little waymark, April 30. This is the Ukraine USA mineral deal, where Ukraine and the US have a deal. The USA is going to be involved in mining within Ukraine, which is at the same time also a way of protecting the Ukraine from Russia invading further into its territory. But on May, yesterday, it was in the news that the Trump administration pulls themselves out of the negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. Russia and Ukraine Trump says basically, Russia and Ukraine should start talk with each other. We have tried our best. Primarily at the moment, Putin is the one that is not willing to give in, so to speak. So now Trump says, I'm done with this. We're done. We have put a lot of money and time in this, I step out. So they start negotiations here, February 18. They restore diplomatic relations. Now they jump out. And I think this is this has been a phase, and now we're entering into a new phase. We're entering into a new time. The mineral deal is signed, and Trump steps out of negotiations, which is May 2nd, yesterday. That's my suggestion of that's what I'm considering at the moment. As the increase of knowledge, 2025, February 18 to May 2nd. When I talk about, and that's in this model, so dispensation 1, dispensation 2, then we are here right now. That's my thought at the moment. And I think that's not my study, but if you do the Western Front, I also think that started in January with the Trump administration getting into office. And I think it was April 28th, the Atlantic article. I think it was shared in the, I'm not sure it was shared in the media no, I think it was on the media broadcast or Bible study group. Or at least it was in the headlines of the news. An interview of Trump in the Atlantic where he said, I rule the country and the world, quote. So I guess you can't read that, but I'm suggesting that marks the end of the increase of knowledge. We can see now, and he's even saying it. We've seen it because it marks the first 100 years. I think it's April 30. Let me see, let me get to my notes. But I think it's April 30 that marked the 100th day of his administration, the first 100 years, 100 days, I'm sorry. It was published on the 28th. The interview took place on the 24th. And I think the mineral deal was signed on April 30th. And President Trump officially withdrew the United States from the Ukraine-Russia peace negotiations on May 2nd, 2025. He also said in this interview, because he was asked, he was considering a third term of being president, and the Constitution doesn't allow a president to have a third term. So he was asked, he hinted at considering a third term despite the constitutional limits. And then he said, maybe I'm just trying to shatter. So he's going to try anyway. That's basically what he said. Even though the Constitution doesn't allow him to have a third term, he suggested, I may try anyway. So anyway, I don't know. I'm not sure if we even need a third term for him to do all his work, to do all his evil work. But yeah, that was all part of his interview. I think this is what I wanted to share. And I suggest we leave it here for now and close with a prayer, have a short break, and come back for some Q&A. Let's pray. Dear Lord, I thank you so much for being with my friends from Kenya today. And if I'm informed correctly, I think there's people from Sudan, South Sudan as well, and maybe others. I'm glad, Lord, to be with such a big group together. And I pray to be with them, to be with this group in all the circumstances they're dealing with. I pray that the truth will make them free. And I pray that you will help them to discern the truth from error, to be able to develop a picture of who you are, or develop a correct understanding of your kingdom. Lord, we can see the rise of the seventh kingdom. We can see the image is set up. We can see the beast is alive. And Lord, we want to be in that opposite kingdom and be part of it. And there's so much we need to learn. And I pray, Lord, that this time of preparation, of learning, will still be there for us. Help us to develop that correct understanding. And I pray that this hour of study may have contributed to that. I thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.